Okay, so welcome everybody to this month's webinar. I'm very excited to show you a lot of new features, new capabilities, new functionality that's going to be coming up in the upcoming VIRL release. As you may well have seen in the newsletter, we have a brand new release in the pipeline. We are literally finishing up the final touches right now and looking to have that posted in the next, hopefully the next couple of days, always subject to testing, but hopefully in the next couple of days we will have a brand new release coming out for you all to enjoy. A lot of material that we're going to try and get through today. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we really kick off. As mentioned, we have the Q&A panel. We have members of the VIRL support team and development team on the panel right now. So if you'd like to pose your questions, please do so. We will do our very best to answer them during the webinar. But if we don't get a chance to, we will do our very best to follow those up, get those answers completed, and those will be posted to the Community Support Forum. The recording for this webinar will also be posted, so that will be available for everybody too. We have a number of people who are going to be presenting today, so let's just take a quick look at what we have in today's agenda. So, as mentioned, we have a new release, which is imminent. So first thing we're going to be taking a look at, as you can see, is a series of features. So static TCP ports, linked latency controls, a new traffic control plane generator, and also an update on the live visualization tools that I know many people have been experimenting with in our previous release. We're also going to be taking a look at a new capability for OpenVPN. So my colleague Ralph is going to be covering that a little bit later. And then we're going to be finishing up by looking at a new configuration import-export capability. And Tom Bryan, who's the developer who's written that, is going to be showing us how this feature works and how you can best utilize that. We're going to close up with looking at how this new release is going to be made available to you. This is going to be different from how many of you will have handled this in the past. So we want to make sure that you're aware of how this release is going to be made available, and also provide you some of the rationale behind why the mechanisms are changing for this particular release. And then hopefully finally we get some good questions, and we will try and cover these items as we wrap up the webinar. Okay, so as mentioned, this is being recorded, so if there are items you want to come back to, those will be posted and made available as usual, both on YouTube and through the Community Support Forum. Okay, so kicking off, as I said, this is a feature-packed release. There is a lot of material. We are not going to be covering all of the capabilities in today's webinar. I'm afraid that would blow out our time slot. So we've just picked a few of the key capabilities, and we want to show that to you now. So I'm going to be covering this first section where we're going to be taking a look at 4 of the different capabilities that we have. Static TCP ports, linked latency controls, the new Routem control plane traffic generator, and also the live visualization tools. Okay, so I'm just going to switch over to sharing with the desktop, and we will get started. Okay, so first up, we want to take a look at TCP static ports. Many of you have raised the issue about the fact that the console ports, the aux ports, monitor ports that we have associated with the virtual machines have until now been unpredictable in nature. You will know that when you start up a simulation, the system would assign a port, and if you shut that simulation down and start it up again, maybe you get the same TCP port number, maybe you don't, and that's been a cause of some frustration for people. So we've now got the mechanism to be able to provide that in a static form. So if you can see here on the diagram, and just slide that panel out the way a little bit so we can zoom in. Okay, so we can now select a node when we're in our design mode and set the console, the aux, the monitor port, and put a number that we wish to assign to that particular node in place. So we're going to take a quick look at how that mechanic actually works. So in VM Maestro, under the node, if we slide this panel up here, we now have, and again, this is the new version of VM Maestro that we're looking at here, okay? So this is not capability that's currently out in the version of VM Maestro you have today, so this is just in the new version. So for each one of these nodes, there are now these 4 fields that we have available. And as we float over these fields, we'll see the tooltip pop up. And this allows me to set a static TCP port number. You can see the range values that are permissible for a console port, an aux port, a monitor port, and an extra port. So we have had some virtual machines that require that 4th serial port. So we can set the ports. We don't have to set all of them. We don't have to set any of them. This is purely an optional feature. So we can click on a particular node, so for example, Miami, and set a value. So here you can see my console ports 5001, 5002. Here's Miami, 6001, 6002. And again, using the label controls, we can make these console ports, aux ports appear or disappear depending on what we want. So I can set these various ports. That value is then being stored in the VIRL file. Now, what this means is if I create this file and hand it to you, if you then take this file, those ports would still be honored. So if you have not modified port 6001, so I created it with 6001, if you now bring up that topology using the file, you will also see port 6001, 6002 being allocated, in this case, to the Miami node. So this gives us an ability to then potentially put together a piece of training information, saying connect on this particular port number, and you will then get access to, in this case, the console port on node Miami. Okay, so there's another piece of mechanic that goes alongside this. At the topology level, we can now set a static port, a static IP address for the management LXC. So the management LXC is our kind of jump host, our management node that's sitting there hidden away in the background. But I can now put an IP address in the flat network range. So here we can see I've used 172.16.1.202. And that network is the system through which we can actually then connect into each of these particular nodes. So if this is running on your laptop, for example, and you are able to ping directly 172.16.1.202, it now means that I can do something like this. So I can then do telnet 172.16.1.202, and now if I give it port number 6001, it's not working. Fantastic. Let's try, let's go 5001. There we go. It was taking a moment, making me panic there for a minute. So we've now got direct access into that particular device using that port number. So you could then use this with Secure CRT, with PuTTY, whatever your telnet client of choice actually is. And again, all we're doing is we're modifying that TCP port. So if I wanted to go over to, let's say, London, again, it's just 7001 in that particular case. And give that a moment. And we should be on, there we go. So we're on to that particular node. So as I said, when we shut down that simulation, start it back up, it's then going to come up with exactly the same TCP port numbers. Now, here's another feature that we have within it. What happens if you have 2 simulations that you want to start up? Well, what you would do in that case is just change the number of that management port, of that management LXC. So for example, if I give it 2003 and I now start up the simulation, I'm going to have exactly the same port numbers, 8001, 6001, 5001, etc. But my management access, instead of being 172.16.1.202, is then going to be 172.16.1.203 and the port number. We can also use this offset capability. So maybe I need to shift those ports. Maybe I need to use something else there. I can put in a value here, say 10,000. And now hopefully you saw that the port number, and you can see that in the diagram here, has now shifted with an offset of 10,000. So now my port numbers are 15,001, 16,001, 18,001, etc. So that then gives us that ability to nail those ports. So every time I start up that simulation, I'm going to be getting the ports that I defined. And as I mentioned, if I were to create this file, and we've actually done this, so we've just posted this morning, the topology that you're seeing here is now available on GitHub. It's using these TCP static ports, so you can get to see how that function works for yourself. Okay, so moving on, we're going to take a look now at the new linked latency capabilities that we have. So we now have an ability when we have our simulation up and running. So we're just going to switch the view here, and we're in simulation mode. Let me just zoom in on the diagram. We have the capability to now dial in link properties for a particular simulation. So that means that, here I've got San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, Paris, London, Frankfurt. So we may want to make links look like they have the latencies of transatlantic or transcontinental links. We may wish to add in functions like jitter, or maybe we've got lossy links where we have particular packet loss. So we can now do that. So we can take a link. For example, let's take this link from London to San Francisco. I can click on the link, and within VM Maestro, if I right mouse click on this particular link, I now do modify the link parameters, and I can now dial in the latency. Now, the latency is unidirectional. So in terms of if I give it 120 milliseconds, it's going to be 120 milliseconds from London to San Francisco and 120 milliseconds from San Francisco back to London. I can then add some jitter into that, let's say 20 millisecond jitter on there, and no, we'll leave the packet loss alone for now. And off we go. That is now in operation. I hope you can see that little icon giving us the identification that is now in place, and we can see by pointing at it, there's the value, the 120 milliseconds with a 10 millisecond jitter on there. So if I now connect into that particular node, so let's go in on London. I think we've got it there. Yeah, I'm still in on London. If I now send pings across to San Francisco, so 192.168.0.8, and we're looking at our loss, our round trip. So here we can see that link is now giving us a latency value close to what we would expect. Remember, we dialed in 120 milliseconds. So let's just see what happens if I then modify those link parameters. Let's drop that down. Let's bring that down to 60 milliseconds. But now I'm going to dial in some packet loss onto that. And let's give it 20% packet loss. OK, so that's now in place. We can see that. Now let's send the traffic across. And we can see, obviously, the latency has reduced. Remember, we are down 120-second plus minus 20 milliseconds. And we've got some amount of packet loss taking place. Now, we need to be careful when we do this, because with just a sample of 5 packets, we may see a higher packet loss than we would normally expect. But if we do it with a larger sample size, so for example, if we now ping with, let's give it 50 packets, and let that run. So remember, we'd set this up with a 20% packet loss. So we should see something hopefully a little more accurate in terms of the total loss across that link now, just because we've got a larger sample size. So that's all running. Now, this capability that we have here is available not only within VM Maestro, but we can also do this within the UWM and also the live visualization capability. So we're going to quickly take a look at the UWM version of this. So here we have it. So I've got a simulation that's running right now. And we have some new tables that appear. So here is all my information for my simulation. And we can see not only the normal telnet connection ports, but also here are my static ports that I have assigned. So we can see the next hop there. And again, this is enabled. So if you have a telnet handler registered, you can just click directly on this link, and that will open up your handler for telnet and bring you straight in on that port. Further down, though, we now have this new table, links. And here we can see, here is my link, London to San Francisco. There's my source interface, my destination interface. And here we can see 20% packet loss, 60 millisecond delay, and 20 millisecond jitter. So I can modify this through here as well. Set my packet loss. Let's bring that back down to 0. And let's bring that back to, let's say, 100 millisecond round trip, and bring the 10 millisecond jitter, apply. And that's now going to be in place. There we go. So the table will then update with my new parameters. Let's see. There we are. So we can then now see our new latency and jitter in place that's in there. So let's send some traffic again. And we should see that reduced latency across that link. There we go. So yes, we're seeing the impact of those changes. Remember, as I said, 100 milliseconds, so it's one-way latency, so we would expect to see something like a 200 millisecond round trip. So this is then very, very useful when we want to start playing around with what do transcontinental links actually look like? What happens when I've got lossy links? How does that impact the traffic that I'm running through? What happens when I have a really, really lossy link and I've got all my various control plane mechanisms in place? What is going on in there? How is my system going to be stable, or is it going to become unstable? So hopefully a nice addition to the toolkit. And hopefully that gives you some interesting capabilities to experiment. Okay, so moving on, we have a new tool in the toolkit. So when we go back in design mode, here from the palette, you'll see a number of new capabilities, some new icons that are available. A couple ones that we want to call out. We're not going to go into it on this webinar, but the ostinato container is going to be in the next release. So some of you may be familiar with the ostinato traffic packet generator. That will be available within the release. There'll be a video going into a lot of detail as to how that function is working. But right now we're going to concentrate on this new beastie. This is Routem. So some of you may have heard of Routem, and some of you may not. This is a control plane traffic generator. This is a device that we can drop into our simulation. It runs in a 2 meg footprint. It's very, very small. So you are able to design these devices in, and even with relatively small memory-constrained viral deployments running on your laptop, you can have many of these connected in. They really are very, very small and lightweight. What are these things? Well, they're a control plane traffic generator, as I mentioned, which means that we have the capability of bringing up an environment, putting in a very, very simple set of commands, and that will then generate OSPF, BGP, ISIS, RIP, a whole series of different functions, and I'll show you where you can find the documentation on this in a moment. You're going to be able to inject control plane sessions into your VIRL environment. So let's take a quick look. So right now I'm in on this device over here, so LXC4. So when this device comes up, you literally just have very, very few commands. It's a very lightweight container. So the command that we use is literally routem -f and the file name. So we're just going to take a quick look at the content of the file. So here's one that I've prepared earlier. So in this example, hopefully you can see here, it's just set up to do OSPF to advertise into my neighbor. So that is my neighbor for Chicago. It's set up to then inject a series of prefixes, so 10 prefixes, starting from 4 with a /32. Now there's the next hop, and it's going to then inject those. So I'm just going to kick that off once more. There it is. So that's now running. And if we log in on Chicago, we can then take a look at what's actually going on in here. Oops, Cisco. Oh, thank you. Maybe we can actually log in. Ah, dear, fat finger time. There we go. Okay, so if we now take a look at my routing table, I have 4 out of our 6 injectors up and running right now. And here we can see a series of different prefixes that are coming in. So this is coming in from LXC2. We can see these 2 prefixes. 3 is coming from LXC3. 4 and 5. So we can manipulate and modify that to inject the various prefixes of our choice. So where can we find more information about the Routem system itself? In UWM, and hopefully you'll notice this new style that we have. So if we rework the UWM interface, now there's a new link once you log in under documentation, where not only have we provided a lot more information on the STD and UWM APIs for you to explore, we also have this link on Routem. So if we click Routem, you can then find this documentation set. So you'll find detailed examples for each one of the protocols, giving you, for example, let me just blow that up a bit, worked examples of how to bring up a particular session. So here you can see the one side from a router, classic iOS configuration, and on the other side here, we can then see examples of route injections. So let's just take a quick look at the BGP piece. So I've got LXC6 on the one side, LXC1 on the other side, and both of these are set up to inject BGP prefixes. So I'm going to connect in. Now, because this is an LXC, the connection method is via SSH. We're going to log in. Username is Cisco. And because I've prepared this example earlier, we can take a quick look at the Routem text. And here we can see it's very, very similar to iOS style configuration, just with some additions. So here we're saying, inject this particular network with an AS path, which is going to be random of length 5. So off we go. We're going to bring that device up. So Routem-F, Routem-F, and my configuration, and off it goes. So that's going to start injecting into San Francisco. Let's bring up the other injector on the other end. Again, Routem-F, Routem.txt. There we go. Okay, so now that's going to take a moment for it to actually come up. Let's connect in on Frankfurt and take a look what's actually going on. And if I take a look, show IP BGP summary, we should now be able to see, yes, indeed, we can see prefixes that are now flooding through. We can see ones from our directly connected injector and ones that we're receiving from the other side of the network. So let's take a look at the tables. And here we can see, as I mentioned, prefixes coming through, random AS paths that we've said that to inject. So now this gives us a very, very simple ability to craft particular kinds of BGP prefixes, OSPF prefixes, ISIS prefixes, and really start to play around with things like route policy, filtering, redistribution controls, all of the rest of this kind of capability. One more thing I just want to mention, this scales very, very easily. So if I want to make a modification to this, I can literally just go in. I happen to use Vi. Various people will boo and hiss at that. Go into my configuration and say, okay, I don't want 10 of these prefixes, but I actually want 100,000 of these prefixes. Save that. Start up my injector again. Off we go. And now let's take a look on Frankfurt. Show IP BGP. Oops, let's look at the summary. There's the summary. And here we can see that's now starting to load 100,000 prefixes. Let's see if that's building up. There we go. So over time, that's now going to bring that right up to 100,000 prefixes. So could you inject a full internet routing table? Yes, absolutely. That's perfectly possible. One thing to note with this initial release of this capability, we're not going to have the ability to automatically create and configure those Routem configuration entries. That's something that we're working on. So initially, it's going to be a very raw, here is the tool, here's the documentation about how to craft the particular prefix injections that you want. And please, experiment. We'll do our very best to answer questions on it. But please note, this is, don't go calling Cisco TAC. They won't support VIRL anyway. But this is a tool that we're making available to the community. Hopefully, you'll find it very, very useful, very powerful, and something which is a nice addition to your learning experience or your experimentation experience. So here we can see, it's building. We're at 70,000 prefixes and building up. Okay, moving on. Live visualization has had an overhaul. So let's kick off the live visualization for our environment here. Up we come, so that's now building up. And we can see entries coming through here. There it goes, so it's building up our environment. So as I mentioned, the link latency controls that we have those in VM Maestro, we have that in UWM, we have it in Live Visualization too. So this dotted link that we see here, that's an indication that we've got link latency operations in place. And if I point to it, here we can see we've got the delay, 100 milliseconds unidirectional, jitter, 10 milliseconds, packet loss dial down at 0. And again, I can just click on that link, bring that down, dial in 10% packet loss, bring the jitter down, submit it, and that's now put in place. We've had some of these, some new capabilities added into the actions list. So if we take a quick look at those, some new ones that we have, we can collect the route table from every device in parallel. So the system will log in, grab the route table, and present that to you. Have the configuration as well. Again, we can grab all of that information and have that presented. So if we do this collect route table, it's probably going to take a long time because we've now just kicked through 100,000 prefixes onto Frankfurt. So I'm not going to do that right now. That could take some time. But for example, if we do this plot paths to prefix, for safety's sake, I'm going to bring down that BGP injector. Let's just stop that. Give that a moment to flush out. Oh, there we go. We just hit the 100,000 prefixes going through. So I'm just going to clear the BGP routes. Oh, clear BGP. All that'll do. Oh, it's still throwing a fit at me. Okay. Oh, sorry. Has that come down now? Oh, sorry. Maybe some. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so that's now come down. We should be well within the safety zone. So we're now going to just collect the route table. And we'll see, there we go, the updates going through. So we can see that in the log. So there is literally, the full route table being collected. And we have an ability to play with this function, saying plot routes to prefix. So it's literally going to show us, oh, no routes been collected. Oops, let's try that again. Collect route table. There we are. Okay. And now can we do that routes to prefixes? No, okay, it's not going to play ball. This feature is going to show us for a particular prefix, so for example, the loopback IP address, how does traffic then pass from San Francisco to London? Is it going to go direct? Would it route through a different path? So it gives us an ability just to plot where traffic is actually flowing. So if we make adjustments, we bring links up, links down, we can then see where these various elements are actually passing. We also have a new function here, so ping from, ping to, and that will then send traffic across. So that's then popped up. It should have popped up. There it is, directly in our log. So we can capture that. And again, if we dial in capabilities in here, such as altering the jitter, the packet loss, etc., that's then going to make its way into the log, so we can see that there. Couple more capabilities just want to highlight here as well. Extract configurations to VIRL file, just like we have in VM Maestro, and also simulation shutdown. So two new capabilities that we have within the live visualization capability. Okay, so that's a whirlwind tour of some of the new functionality. So as we mentioned, static TCP ports, the ability to nail ports up and again have those ports available, simulation run over simulation run. The new link latency, jitter and packet loss controls, as we mentioned, available in Maestro, available in UWM, available in the live visualization piece. The new Routem traffic injector, and just to show you, this is going to be available with the documentation set under this new documentation link, which will appear in UWM. And as I mentioned, there's the Routem list, and if we take a look, you have all of the various capabilities there documented. And lastly, but not least, updates to the live visualization engine, and we really value your feedback on all of those. Okay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ralph, who's going to take us through the next part of today's webinar. We're going to take a look at this new OpenVPN capability. So, Ralph, I'm going to pass the ball to you.
Alrighty, thanks, Joel. Yeah, so I'm really excited to see the OpenVPN capability in VIRL. I've been playing with this for quite a while now, and I was using this for various occasions, and it really is very helpful to see a VPN connectivity or having a VPN connectivity back into the VIRL host for various reasons. And see. Yeah, so what we typically have, I mean, it depends on how your setup looks like, but what you typically have is, some sort of workstation or some sort of host that you are directly connected to, or that you're running your VM on effectively. And in this case, I mean, it is possible to, use all the interfaces that the VIRL host has, and you know that there are typically 5 of them, like the management, the flat1, and SNET, and the internal one, and connect directly to those interfaces. But what happens if you have something like this, like a scenario where you do have your workstation that you use to configure and play with your simulations on a different machine than your actual VIRL host is. So in my case, and that's what I'm going to show you in a demonstration in a couple of minutes, is this guy over here sits in a data center in San Jose, and my machine over here is in Germany. So I'm using this capability of connecting my workstation over here through the VPN tunnel to the VIRL machine in San Jose, and then being able to interact with the simulation pretty much in the same way as Joel did, by being able to telnet to the consoles of these guys, or directly use management applications to talk to the routers that are running as a simulation on the VIRL host itself. And this technology that we're using is OpenVPN. You might be familiar with OpenVPN as a technology, and what is unique in this case is that we do run OpenVPN in layer 2 mode. So that means that this guy over here, and I'm not sure if you can actually see my mouse, but the laptop on the left is part of the flat network in the VIRL host on the right. So it is directly adjacent, and it has an IP address from the flat network. It can directly interact with those devices that are running as a simulation on the VIRL host. All right, I'm going to share my screen now, and let's see, screen sharing. Probably screensaver kicked in. Yeah, no, actually not. So, as I said, so this is a machine that is running here on my local network, and I'm using a VIRL server. So this VIRL server that is shown here, this 10.195 and so on and so forth, is running in San Jose in a data center. And if we go into the server configuration here, there is a new tab showing up that actually is called OpenVPN. Would have guessed it. And I've already configured it. So what it does, if you're configuring it for the first time, it creates a certificate authority, it creates a certificate for the client, and it creates a certificate for the server. And you can see the server certificate down here. And the certificates for the client, they are shared for all the users. So if you download that configuration file for the VPN, you can share that between multiple users. We have a pool of IP addresses that you can see here. And that pool of IP addresses is like 10 IP addresses large. So 10 users can or theoretically 10 users can dial into the system at the same time, but they share the same credentials, right? So you turn it on, some packages get installed, a certificate authority will be created, and everything will be done in the background automatically, and then the system is up and running. Now, where do I get my client information from? For that, I need to go up here to the user that I'm logged in as. And then down here, you can see that there is the OpenVPN client configuration file. And this is what I need to download to my local machine, right? So it's a small text file that has the certificates, that has the client information, the server information, so where do you need to connect to, and everything in that same file. There are a variety of OpenVPN clients available. Pretty much all of them, or there are a few commercial ones that you have to pay money for, but there are also like a variety of versions for OpenVPN clients that are free. Since I'm on a Mac, I'm using TunnelBlake, which is kind of a very nice implementation of an OpenVPN client that's already installed. So all I need to do right now is I need to click on the client file itself, and it says, okay, do I want to open this? Yes, please. And then TunnelBlake kicks in and says, okay, do I want to install that file? Yes, I do, and I install it only for me. I need to give it a password, so my root password, my account password. And then the thing is pretty much installed. So let's see. So here it is, right? So we can watch as this connects. So click on the log file here, or on the log panel here. And then it reaches out to my server, and it uses the certificate to authorize and authenticate, and then it pulls down some information about IP addressing and so on and so forth. And eventually it will connect. Yeah, it's turned green and it's connected now. So let's open up a terminal now. And we do have a tab interface now in place. And as you can see, this host or this interface now lives on the flat network. And I can actually ping the VIRL host here. 16.1.254 is the default. And as you can see, I mean, this latency is not simulated. This is real, right? So we're going from Germany to San Jose and back. And what I can also do is, like, I can ping my LXC management host, as Joel has told you before. So let's see, that is, in my case, it's statically configured 233, and I have a simulation running that has hosts there. For example, I can telnet to this management host here, 33, on port 6005, and that should get me, to a console of the router in Brussels, and I can see show IP interface brief. So this guy has now this IP address, and we can quit from here and telnet directly to this IP address, and that's also working. So I'm now using telnet, or I could do nifty things like, okay, use a very popular management application, which would be SNMP, and do something like SNMP walk-v2c, and then community public. So I've configured some SNMP on that guy, and do a IP address again and say system, and now I'm directly talking to this router in a simulation from my workstation, and using IP, because I'm directly connected on the flat network. So this is a layer 2 connection, and I can do all the things remotely without having the need of running the VIRL server on the same machine as my VIRL client. And of course, I could use VM Maestro to connect to the management address still, or use the management interface as Joel has shown before. So I could still do these things here if I look at my simulation, and then look at this tutorial simulation here, and use the static port connection connecting to the LXC host here, and that, as Joel said before, brings up, if you have installed telnet handlers, brings up the console directly in your favorite application, in your favorite terminal application. Yeah, that pretty much is what I wanted to show you, and I hope you find this as useful as I do, because this is really saving my day every day. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ralph. Okay, next up, let me just grab the ball back. Okay, Tom is going to take us through a new feature, new functionality, configuration capability with direct import export. So I'm going to hand the ball over to Tom. All yours, sir.
Thanks, Joel. So this one's a fairly simple feature, but something that we've had several users asking for. Let me go ahead and get this shared out here. And I need... Yeah, am I sure showing? Yeah, okay. Okay, so here we have a couple of topologies, and looking at this one, if I select the nodes, you'll see in the configuration pane down here in properties, all the nodes are blank, or all the configurations are just blank right now. So this is, as it would be if you just, drew a topology or somebody handed you one. And now, of course, we can run AutoNetKit. We can configure these by hand. But if we have a directory with configuration files in them, I can say File, Import, and now underneath the File Import menu, there's a new option for import configurations into an existing topology. So if you have if you're just running this from the editor, while the editor itself has focus, it'll pick that file by default. And now I can browse into, just use my file browser here to browse a directory. And here's a bunch of, configuration files. They're just plain text files. with a CFG extension, and the name of the file matches the name of the node. So click that, click Finish, and VMaestro will read those files and then assign the configuration for each of the nodes from those configuration files. So now if I go into VMaestro and look, we see the topology. We have the little asterisk here indicating that the file has been modified. And if I click on the nodes, we see that we've got the configurations imported from those files on the file system. So I'm going to just undo that so we can do this again with this slight change. Okay, so now we're back to the state with blank configurations. Let's see, we will again do a file import those configurations. This time if we select one of these other directories I have set up here, this one you'll notice has just 3 files, IOSD 1, 2, and 3 in the file browser. So if I select to import from that directory, import to, we'll import those configs, but we do warn you about nodes in your topology that had no corresponding files. That's fine. It's not necessarily a problem if you didn't want to update those nodes. That basically we'll import the ones that we find files for, and the other ones we just leave alone. We give this warning just in case you accidentally selected, for example, the wrong directory. So, in this case, 1, 2, and 3 just got updated, but 4, 5, and 6 are still blank because there was no file there for those ones. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and just select all these nodes and delete that. If you do a multi-select in VMaestro, you can normally go into the properties editor and select and change multiple values at once. That works in the configuration pane also. So if you wanted ever to just blank all your configs, you can do a select all, select the properties view, and if there's a multiple values thing here, you can just select it and clear it out, and that'll set all your configs to be blank again. We also similarly give an import warning here if you are importing from a directory that has configs that appears to have config files for nodes that don't match your topology. So here we have some configs for IOSVL2-1 and a node called IOSVL2-2. So when I do that config import, we're going to import the configs for 1 through 6, but then we'll warn you that there's some files that were in that directory that look like they were supposed to match nodes in your topology, and we didn't find those nodes. So we just didn't do anything with those. Again, this is not necessarily a problem. It might indicate that you selected the wrong directory that was supposed to correspond to some other topology, but it might be fine. You might just have all of your topology configurations for all possible nodes sitting in one directory. So again, in this case, all the nodes got updated 1 through 6 because we had files for all of those, and that's again perfectly fine. In this case, I'm going to have I now have configs for all of my nodes. I'll also point out, see, we can also run it by just selecting here the projects view from that import file. Import. If I select a directory that, let me get to import 4. So this directory has configs for each of my devices, but if I swap over here to Finder and we look at, I think IOSV 1, right? So IOSV 2, 3, 4, these guys are all configurations. IOSV 1 is just a completely empty text file. That's fine. You would use that if you, for example, want to do a config import, and on import you would like, it successfully imported those 6 configs, but of course one of them was just an empty file, so that blanked out. IOSV 1 used to have a config, and now it's been blanked out. So if you want, for example, for some reason to set up a test case where you're going to import a bunch of configs, you want to clear out config on a specific device, just create a blank file whose name matches the node, and it'll import as an empty config. We have a similar capability in the other direction. So here I can do same thing, file export. So we have export node configurations to files. So this one, you're just going to pick a directory. I don't have one set up here, so for this webinar, I'm just going to create a new folder, and then we'll use that folder for the export. So again, this one, if I go look at the export folder, just creates a single CFG file that corresponds to each node in the topology. So IOC1 config, IOC2 config. Note that we'll definitely create a node for each of a file for each of the nodes in the topology, but something like the unmanaged switch, since unmanaged switch doesn't take a configuration, we just want to write a file so we know there's no error, but it's just going to have this sort of marker text and it just says, there's no configuration available for that one. And on import, we do look for that specific text that we write out on export so that when we import, we don't end up trying to write, we won't actually write that. We'll just keep it blank. We'll kind of ignore files that have that sort of a placeholder marker in it. If you export again from the same file, to the same directory, of course, those config files are already there. That's fine. I can export back to that same directory. Say I've exported configs and I just want to keep a copy there while I did some things. Now I think I like my current changes better, so I want to get that copy updated again. So I do that config export. You'll be prompted, if there's a file that already matches the name that we're going to use, we'll tell you that we're about to overwrite it. You can just, if you know that you want to overwrite all those files, you can just say yes to all. We'll overwrite all the files with the current configs. If you're doing some sort of iterative test where you'd like to see your exports at multiple different points in the process, you can do this export where you create new directories every single time, or you could set it to say, well, let me go ahead and create a new one first. We'll do export to. I can create multiple directories by hand, but the other thing I can do is select this option to create a timestamp-based directory. So this way I can do some start with my initial configs, do that export. I could run this topology, make some changes, export the configs, extract the configs from the running simulation back into my topology file, and then I can redo that export. This makes it just a little bit easier if you're going to, you can just select the same folder over and over. But if you look in the file browser in export 2, I don't have those configs directly in there. There's a timestamp directory per export. So if you're trying to get a set of configs that you'd like to just have in the directory so you can kind of compare what you just did, you can do it that way. It makes it a little bit faster. So this, like I said, it's just a feature several users have requested about being able to take, if you want to have check in your configs into source control separately, or if you want to, for whatever reason, have one topology file with 3 or 4 different possible configs. This is one way to do it. You'd have a few different directories of configs. You just need to do the before you start working with your topology, you would just do right click, select it, import, and then import from the whatever directory you want. And same thing on export. If you need to use some other tool that wants to see a directory of configs or anything like that, just open the topology or right click on the topology and ask it to export to directories of your choice. And that's it for the config export import. That'll be available in the upcoming release of VM Maestro.
All right, thank you very much, Tom. Okay, we've got a few more minutes left, and we just want to run through some of the logistics around this new release. Okay, so this is a major infrastructure update. We have upgraded from OpenStack Icehouse release to OpenStack Kilo. The key piece behind that is where you will have experienced, or many of you will have experienced, the ability to do an in-place upgrade. That, I'm afraid, is not going to be an option. So it means that you will need to download the new OVA or ISO image. That can be done, we'll show that in a moment. Installation is as per usual. So if you've done it once, it's going to be exactly the same steps that you're going to be going through again. No changes to your sort keys. It's exactly the same in that respect. But I'm afraid it does require a fresh download of the OVA or the ISO image. These are milestone releases. The next time that we're expecting to actually have to go through an upgrade like this will probably be when we move up to a new version of the Ubuntu operating system that we're based on. So This is something which is going to be a forklift, but it will probably be the one forklift for the next 8 to 9 months, something of that nature. So yes, sorry, pain now, goodness follows. So if you are an existing VIRL user, you will be able to do or download the new image in a self-service manner. The US sortmasters, so sortmasters US-1, 2, 3, and 4 will be loaded. EU servers EU 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be loaded with the OVAs and the ISO images. The OVA images are going to come out first. The ISO will follow along subsequently. So you can run this sort call. It will then sit there, ponder a while. There'll be numerous amounts of cups of coffee involved in the download, but it will then result in that download, that OVA ISO being pulled down and present within your VIRL server itself. You then can extract that out and run. The other option is indeed we will be able to make the image available through the special file download capabilities which you received your original VIRL file as you will have done in the past. It's large, okay, so a lot of new images that are in there. Just to add in, we've got a new ASA firewall, so ASA 951, updated XRV, so 532, which some of you may or may have received already. Some people may not have updated, so there's a new XRV 532 for some of you. And as you mentioned, the new Ostinato image, the new Routem image, etc. So it's about 5.6 gig, maybe a little bit under that actually. And you can just watch the progress using this particular command. So as you mentioned, yes, this is a landmark release. Yes, we're going to need to go through some pain on this one, but this should be good for the next 8 to 9 months at a minimum. The rest of the upgrades from here on will be back to in-place upgrades. Okay, just a reminder that where can you find out information about your products? You can check out your site and you'll be able to see your license key. Hopefully you will have all seen, if you're existing VIRL users, the update that took us from 15 Cisco nodes to 20 Cisco nodes. And just to remind people, if you want that larger node capability, the new 30 node license is available. You can upgrade your license key if you wish to get that 30 node capacity. Okay, questions. Alejandro, where do we have particular questions that are or topics, anything particularly hot that people have been asking throughout the webinar today?
For the most part, we haven't had too many repeat questions, but there's still some questions from previous webinars that we've had. For example, well, actually, I guess we'll start off with CCIE is still kind of a big thing. Can we use VIRL for CCIE, such as route switch?
Yeah, so there's certainly, you absolutely can. Certainly, we know of people who have been using CCIE for RNS, certainly quite successfully, and also for service provider as well. Yes, we do not have serial links. Yes, we know. And we are highly, highly unlikely to ever get serial links, I'm afraid. I know people have been asking about it, but it's very, very unlikely that we're going to get serial link support. However, for the vast majority of the topic material that we believe you need to cover for the CCIE exam, you should be able to use the capabilities within VIRL to be able to address that. Yep, won't be able to deal with things like serial ports, HDLC encapsulation, frame relay. Is frame relay still in the exam? But yeah, obviously there will be those kinds of gaps, but for the vast majority of what you need to cover, yes, you should be able to use it. And we do know of people who have been quite successful in both their studies and preparation leading up to the CCIE.
Another question that needs for clarification would be for static ports. When we looked at the static port demo, the LXC management IP address, does it have to be on flat?
Okay, so yes, the management LXC port has to be on flat. It's providing a bridging mechanism for us. So it is key that it is on flat. It doesn't have to be on flat 172.16.1. You could move it onto 172.16.2 or whatever subnet range that you've configured your system with. But yes, it will need to be on flat. Now, if you don't have direct access to flat, as Ralph demonstrated using the OpenVPN connection mechanism, you can use, and Ralph showed that, you can use the OpenVPN tunnel to provide you with that direct connectivity from your laptop onto your VIRL server and land you onto that flat network. So if that is an issue where you don't have that direct access connectivity, the OpenVPN solution in combination with it will give you that capability.
And that was a perfect little segue, actually, because just to add on to that is that we will be having an OpenVPN document or white paper to show you exactly how to use OpenVPN. There were a couple of other questions on that as well.
Yeah, that's true. And just to add, we're also going to be posting videos to accompany these new features. So there's a video on OpenVPN, on Routem, static TCP ports utilization, link latency, and also the ostinato traffic generator. So that will be posted up on YouTube, and that will be available in the next couple of days. Any other questions, Alejandro?
That'll cover it.
All right. Okay. Okay, so just wrapping up, so we've covered quite a lot of material. As I mentioned, this is not everything that is in the new release. There's a bunch of additional features we just haven't had time to go through today. Those will be covered in future webinars. If you have particular topics that you're looking for, would like to see covered in the webinars or as a video, please do let us know. Drop us a note on the support forum. We do appreciate the comments and feedback that you provide. Hopefully, you've seen some nice new toys coming in the release. We're really excited about it. There's a lot of good stuff that's coming together, which we feel will be really helpful for a lot of people with the work that they're doing, be that for studying or for modeling or just tinkering around with the system. So do take a look at the tutorials at the YouTube channel. As I mentioned, there'll be new videos that are going up. Today's demo topology that I was using, and that has the static TCP ports, that has just been posted today, so that's available right now. You can suck that down and make use of that. I'd like to thank the rest of the team who've been helping field the questions today, and of course to yourselves for attending. And with that, we're going to close up this video, this webinar, the video recording, the Q&As, as we mentioned at the beginning of the session. That's all going to be available probably within about 48 hours, and that will be posted. Videos will go up on YouTube. The links will go up on the community forum. And as I mentioned, we will do our very best to answer any of the questions that we have not had a chance to go through today. And with that, I'm going to close up today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you next time, and we really hope you enjoy the new version of VIRL. It's coming. It's imminent. We're putting together the final fixes, and hopefully get that posted. And of course, there will be the release announcement once that is up and available for you. Okay, thank you very much for your attendance today. Hope you've enjoyed it, and hope to see you again next time. Thank you very much.